Zoltan!
How's it gangin' dudes and dudettes? My name is Sean and welcome back to my channel where we have an excellent interview for you today. A strong proponent of UBI. We're going to see just how strong he is. So, hey guys, I was in here editing and I had to reinstall Skype because ever since I downloaded it, it kept making this notification sound. And I just downloaded Skype just to do this interview. So every once in a while, you're probably going to hear this sound. And when you do, just know that's not your computer, it's mine. It's going to happen every few minutes, so I apologize to Zoltan if you heard that throughout the interview, and I apologize for you guys, but it's not really fair to me to ask Zoltan for a re-interview, so I'll edit as many as I can, but just ignore it, you know what I'm saying? I'm so sorry. I have reinstalled Skype, and it doesn't do it anymore. I don't know what, you know it is. Enjoy the interview. All right, cool. So, yeah, we only have a limited amount of time, so thank you for being here. We'll just jump right into it.
Absolutely.
So first off, I have to say that your name, right? Your name is popular in European countries, but it's a bit of a meme in America, right? So what is your take on it, and how do people normally react?
Well, you know, my name is Hungarian, and it's probably the most common Hungarian name out there. And you know, that's a little bit strange because in America it's totally esoteric. So everyone hears and thinks like either it's a space character or a fictional character. But honestly, it's a very common name in Hungary and Eastern Europe. So, you know, it's somewhat advantageous because it is kind of memorable, but at the same time, it's a bit odd. And so maybe it gets me in trouble sometimes.
Yeah, I can see that. So, well, I just had to ask just because, you know, it's such an iconic name. So, what is your background or what qualifies you to be president of the United States?
Well, that's a very tough question. You know, it's tough to know what qualifies anyone to run for a job like the presidency. But I began my career at National Geographic out of college. And so I have a lot of experience, over 100 countries I visited, you know, as a journalist, dealing with objective truth and reporting on them. But from there, I began a real estate development business that did really well. And I ultimately sold my business, which allowed me to kind of have a lot more free time and allow me to, you know, fund campaigns and things like that, and do philanthropic kind of endeavors. But I've also been a manager at a wildlife organization. I've also done other things like, you know, written novels and other nonfiction books that were all bestsellers. So how well could I run the country? Well, I think I'd be very good at picking staff that would allow me to figure out the facts and make good decisions. And I'm also a nice, normal person, married to a physician. I have 2 nice kids. You know, I take care of my mom, all these other things. So it's hard to know what qualifies anyone to really run for the presidency. But I think overall, I do have a wide array of qualifications, you know, in addition, of course, to graduating from Columbia University and things like that. But really, I think it's my journalism skills. You know, I've just been dealing for 25 years with facts and trying to make good decisions on reporting on them. And I think that's sort of a similar job to the presidency. Take all of the facts you can and make good decisions.
Sure, fair enough. I mean, you know, we're very pro anti-establishment characters anyway. So, you know, the fact that you are, you know, aren't, you know, necessarily bought and paid for is a big plus for us, you know, in the Yang Gang, right? So, I would say that's definitely a plus for us. And of course, you know, the mom is a big selling point. You know, you got to take care of your mom, right? So
I do take care of my mom. She lives with me, you know, and unfortunately, my father died a few years back, so that's why she's here. And but, you know, it's good also because my mom helps out with the grandkids. So we're a really nice family unit. And my wife's a physician. So, you know, we're very tied to science. And, of course, I'm a science and technology guy. So, and I live in the Silicon Valley area. So, you know, but it's really tough. I just think sort of like President Obama, you want a good-hearted person to run for the presidency. And that's been one of my problems with Trump is that, you know, Trump, I don't really know if he's a good-hearted individual. And I think the presidency that's of all places, that's where you really need a good, fair, just human being to try to call the shots.
All right. So speaking of Trump, like, are you used to run under the transhumanism party? Is it Republican now, and why not a Democratic run? What's going on with that?
Well, you know, I might run as a Democrat in 2024, 2028, or some other time. And I've, you know, also run as a Libertarian for the governor position in California. Honestly, what a lot of people know me around the world for is being a transhumanist advocate, somebody who's trying to spread news of science and technology. And frankly, in a lot of places in America, the stuff that I talk about is pretty weird. At least that's what a lot of people think. It's not weird in any way in California where I live or New York or other places on the East Coast. So, I mean, there's this idea that I'm kind of more, not so much bound to a party, but I'm bound to the scientific method. I'm bound to science and technology. And really, when you look at historically what has moved the species forward most, it's been science and technology. So I'm advocating for those principles in government, in the role of government. And it's a very unique position to try to say, well, I will run the country based on the scientific method. And, this is sort of quite different. It doesn't really apply to parties because the Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians, nobody's thinking like this. But I really think that using pure reason and logic to govern a nation is probably the most reasonable approach to trying to, provide the most for all American citizens.
Okay, so are you running on the Republican ticket?
Yes, I am running as a Republican right now. I have not been welcomed there. It's pretty obvious by a lot of Republicans out there.
Well, transhumanism seems pretty hippy-dippy, to a lot of conservatives out there, right?
Well, it does, of course. And again, this really has to do with demographics. If you ask younger people about transhumanism, or you ask anyone in San Francisco or the California area, a lot of people know, of course, what it is, and they do support these ideas. But most conservatives, especially in the middle country of the Bible Belt, they would say, hey, we're not for those ideas. But it's very important that the Republicans pick up science if, they're going to be half governing the nation as they are right now in Congress. But, Republicans seem to be almost anti-science. I'm trying to change that.
All right. Well, I would implore you to run on a Democratic, ticket because that would make, it would sell a lot better. But moving on, because we only have a limited amount of time, getting to the heart of the interview, why do you think UBI is needed to help fix America?
Well, I think the obvious thing, and if you just take a walk down Silicon Valley, you'll say, wow, all these companies are working on robotics and automation. And this is our future. There's really no pretending that a human being can compete against a machine intelligence 10, 20, 30 years in the future. All our jobs are going to be replaced. My wife's a surgeon. Her job is going to be replaced at some point by a robot that can deliver babies faster, better, more efficiently than her without getting sick time or anything like that. So we need a universal basic income because jobs will be lost to automation. Now, it hasn't happened in a huge torrent yet, but next 5-10 years, you're going to see massive job losses because of automation. And that's where the universal basic income becomes critical because people won't have a way to feed themselves, to shelter themselves, and they will riot. They will, they will cause all sorts of problems. So, providing a basic income isn't just about being nice to people. It's about keeping the country running smoothly, and it's about creating a new kind of way of economics, one that's almost post-capitalism for some people.
Yes, right on. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, but how does your UBI proposal different from, say, somebody like Andrew Yang who's popularized it, and how would it differ in implementation, and what is the amount, maybe?
Absolutely. So, my federal land dividend is sort of a Republican version or a libertarian version. And my federal land dividend is a universal basic income. Basically, 50% of the 11 most western states in the U.S. are empty federal land, mostly unused. And I have suggested that we would lease off these pieces of land to big business who would then pay out dividend payments to us to use that land and make money off it. And those dividend payments would likely equal around $1,700 a month if 85% of the federal land was leased out. Now, you have to understand, we have like 800 million acres. And California, for example, is sitting on, and when I say 800 million acres, a lot of the estimates put that land value at $150 to $200 trillion. So if you take $150 trillion and you divide it by 325 million Americans, every single American would own approximately $500,000 of equity in federal land. Now, obviously, $500,000 is quite a lot when you put it in a bank account or lend it to somebody, and that person pays out a dividend. $500,000 with a 5% dividend. All of a sudden you're starting to make a nice monthly income. So that's where we get to this $1,700 a month. Now, I usually say $1,000 a month just because Andrew Yang has popularized UBI so much, and $1,000 a month would only use approximately 50% of the federal land out there. The only difference between my plan is my plan doesn't, first off, my plan doesn't raise taxes whatsoever, nor could my plan probably be implemented immediately. Mr. Yang could raise, if he became president, could raise taxes, and all of a sudden we have a UBI within 1 year. Whereas mine might take 4, 5, 10 years to get different pieces of land rented out to, these different companies who would then pay a dividend. But the good thing about my thing is that it doesn't raise taxes, so it's bipartisan, meaning that Republicans will probably support it because ultimately they're not raising taxes to pay for any kind of different welfare services. Also, my system doesn't necessarily replace welfare system. It might be something that's on top of it. I don't even look at mine necessarily as trying to provide any kind of welfare. Mine is just returning money that every single American citizen has a birthright to.
Okay, well, now, I would push back a little bit. I wouldn't say that Andrew Yang's UBI, gets rid of welfare. It's a choice. You get to also have welfare. So, there's a little bit of pushback there. But I would also think that it's kind of a different idea to maybe, like, you're playing the long game with the UBI. How, you'd have to dull it out over, I guess, I don't know how you would do it, but over the course, like you say, of 10 years, how would you translate, wealth from land into people's pockets directly?
Well, so let me just give you, California is a great example. We have a huge amount of undeveloped coastline, and they've been protecting it for environmental reasons or nature reasons, really. It's not environmental necessarily. But if you drive down the highway near the beach 101, which is quite famous for vacations, you'll see all this empty land. Well, this land is worth somewhere between $3 to $5 trillion worth of just sitting there.
And the government owns it.
Yeah, the government owns it, and they protect it. They don't allow any development to happen. Of course, California also has the highest poverty rate of any state in the country. We have about 13 million people living at the poverty line. We have the worst homeless problem. We should take that land in California. We should let the developers lease it from the government or from the people, and then the developers would pay, let's say, put a 99-year lease, and that money of all that $3 to $5 trillion would produce something like already $250 a month for all Californians. Actually, it'd probably be like $500 a month for all Californians, but maybe $250 a month for all U.S. citizens. Remember, California has such a huge base of people. We have 40 million people in our state, the largest state, I believe. But the point, though, is that there is a huge amount of resources that could almost within a year or two be activated and turned into something where developers would love to take that land. They would love to buy it. They'd love to build out new cities, new communities, new houses. But the problem is that, a lot of people are concerned about environmental issues, and I understand that that's a concern. My program would not touch national parks whatsoever or federal lands that are heavily used by the public. You have to understand, most of this area, that just the California area, for example, is completely undeveloped. There's nobody there. And so we could easily let people build there, have homes there, bring in communities, bring in, commercial centers and things like that. And the same thing with land in Nevada. 96% of Nevada is unoccupied, and we have mineral resources there worth trillions and trillions of dollars, and yet it's just kind of empty federal land, and not even that many animals live there. So it's just, we haven't tapped it. The American government policy has been, let us keep our natural resources for many future generations from now. And that sounds fine, but the problem is we have a lot of poverty right now. We have job losses coming through automation. I think it's time to tap the natural land and provide a basic income. Now, I would be open to working with Mr. Yang in something that might combine a couple different basic incomes all together. Maybe a little bit of VAT, maybe a little bit of, my policy. Maybe there's another way to have a universal basic income, because that might be the best way to get Congress to jump on board, to have a couple different UBI plans that are bipartisan more in nature.
Well, now, there's a lot there to unpack, and we're pressed for time, but so you're saying that this new swaths, these huge swaths of land that would now be developed, and the resources would be taken out of them, and of course, would be my follow-up question would be the natural reserves and stuff like that not being touched. That's cool, the national parks. But how do you guarantee companies who come in and develop that area? How do you guarantee that it transfers into UBI? How do they not say, well, it's just our profits? How do you guarantee that happens?
Well, the government and the Congress would have to stand up and say, look, this is the deal up front, and if you go against the deal, then we confiscate your business or something like that.
Would it be a bill, or would it be an executive order?
I think it would have to be a bill, and the reason is that it's going to be incredibly difficult to do an executive order at that level and get when you're talking about a basic income for everybody. Right. So I think it's something that has to go through Congress. Otherwise, it'll be vetoed down and all these other things. So I just think the president has a lot of power, but it should not be upon him or her ultimately to make a decision that, especially in terms of raising taxes, or given how many people are kind of environmentally conscious, to say, oh, this is what we're going to do with our land. But I want to point out, Trump is already doing versions of my federal land dividend. The only difference, like you've heard Trump handing out land in New Mexico and Utah to his buddies, the only difference is that when he hands that land out, the rich corporations get richer. They don't give that money back to the people. I want to take that same land, except when rich corporations get rich, they have to pay their fair share in a basic income. There's enough land there for the rich corporations to make a bit of money and also to pay a nice land dividend.
All right, so those are my softball questions. We got like 6 or 7 minutes left. Let's go ahead and jump into a little bit tougher ones. Like, I can't find anything about you supporting UBI anywhere in the past, and I don't want to say you're jumping on a bandwagon, so am I wrong? What has been your history with UBI?
Well, I supported it way before Mr. Yang did, and that this is not only, a concrete knowledge. I wrote articles for Vice magazine and stuff like that. So if you just go on the internet, you can see that I've been supporting universal basic income since early 2015 when I wrote a couple different articles. Now, I've written many articles on universal basic income before 2016, 2017. So I've been a big supporter of it.
Okay, yeah, so you are a proponent of UBI long-standing. That's good because, yes, my search did go back as far as 2016, so that's fair enough. Let's see. What else do I got here? Oh, yeah. And okay, now this is, to me, seems a little controversial. In 2016, you said in the future you could see drones surveilling and following, criminals. Do you still support this? Is it not like an invasion of privacy? Is it in any way ethical, unethical, and sort of reminiscent of China today, right?
Well, let's be clear. China has a social credit system, and we're talking about facial recognition that gives you plus or minuses on whether you go to church, whether you do this, you play softball. I'm talking about drones following criminals around that otherwise would be in prison, that we have to pay all these taxes for, so that these people can kind of do nothing all day long. If we could get criminals out into the open, working again, paying taxes, we would have a lot more money in the system to pay out a basic income and all these other things, more services and things like that. And the only thing we need is a little bit of facial recognition, monitoring these criminals either at the workplace or at their home or whatever. And plus, the criminals then, when you're in jail, you become kind of more of a criminal because you're among like-minded people. So this facial recognition system was really designed for the criminal population. Of course, you have to understand, we have like 2 million criminals. Half of them are for nonviolent crimes, especially drug crimes. A lot of these people don't belong in prison. But it would be too much to ask the Republican Party to say, just let them all out, even though that's how I feel. What we could do is use some type of tracking system to keep them at least monitored, and that way we would be able to have them back in the workforce paying taxes. Now, people worry about facial recognition, but believe me, every single major police officer, captain in the United States supports AI facial recognition for a lot of other different things, not just criminals, for stopping human trafficking, for violent crimes that might be happening, or also terrorism. And then there's also this idea that an old person collapses on a street and some type of facial recognition can say, oh, wow, let's send an ambulance to that person right away. Or a child falls into a pool and starts drowning when the parents aren't watching. There's a lot of reasons that we would have some facial recognition happening. But I think the government has to be very concerned, and the people themselves, that doesn't get misused like it's being misused in China. We can have facial recognition without creating a surveillance state. The surveillance can just be tied maybe only to, the government, who never can release these things, or the data is always, let's say, every 24 hours completely deleted. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to use it, but let's not completely knock out facial recognition as something that's evil. In many ways, I like it. I have 2 children. I like when I know that my child is in school and that she's safe, or when she walks down to the park, we can see her. I mean, that's one of the great things about having a phone as a parent. So I think, I know everyone's worried about the surveillance state, but there are some very huge plus sides as well if we could just kind of have a better balance of it.
Well, sure. I think that you'd have a hard time convincing people because the trust in the government is so low. But, work on that. I think you have a couple points that could be there. But my final question, and if you have a few minutes after this final question, I have just a couple questions from my subscribers, if you don't mind knocking those out. They're kind of simple.
Sure.
But the last question is, with little media coverage going up against Trump and no real clear path, why stay in the race?
Well, so, I think after every single state goes to elections. Obviously, we're on a lot of ballots for Super Tuesday, and so we're going to get a lot of traction there. The answer is sort of like Mr. Yang. Well, you have to decide when you want to drop out if you decide to drop out. In my case, I really don't have any chance of defeating Trump. I didn't pretend from the beginning I did. What I have, though, is a pretty good platform for spreading a message of science and technology as well as basic income, especially to the Republican Party. A lot of people like me run not knowing we're not going to win, but knowing that I'm almost like this Trojan horse in the Republican Party. All of a sudden, I'm getting tens of thousands, maybe millions of Republicans to consider basic income for the first time. Now, maybe it won't happen on my watch, but maybe in 2024 or 2028 or 2032, somebody else will come and they'll say, you know what, we've been talking about this basic income for a while. We've been talking about transhumanism for a while. So a lot of times people run knowing they're going to lose, but they're still making a difference in the party that they represent and in America as a whole. So I will, of course, drop out when I feel I'm no longer being influential, but luckily my campaign seems to be growing quite a bit. It's of course not huge, and I'm not getting a lot of mainstream media, but we're getting a lot of local media, 4 or 5 articles a day now, leading up to Super Tuesday. So we are bending I guess the wand a bit towards.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, you've reached a few thousand people here for sure. So, I guess questions from the Yang Gang. A lot of them has been already covered, like about UBI and your name and stuff like that. And I'm gonna butcher this guy's name, but Eddie Kamba 6969. Do you support reparations? Why not?
Well, I mean, reparations for what? I suppose
for slavery.
For slavery?
Right.
Oh, very tough question. At this moment, I do not support reparations. However, I do support a basic income. If there was not going to be a basic income, I think it would be a very different question. I do, however, support reparations for people that have been criminalized due to minor drugs like marijuana and stuff like that. I think in the last 50 years, if you've been put in jail for marijuana or lost some kind of property because of it, something like that, because now there's like 15 million people that have, drug users, they say, but these are just marijuana users. Now it's legal in half the states anyways. I think there might be some reparations there. I think slavery is a little bit too far back. I would rather fix that with free college, as I support, as well as a universal basic income so that everybody will have enough money for food, shelter, and the things that they want to do in their lives.
All right. Melanie Reed says, what is your stance on Medicare for all or universal health care?
So obviously universal health care is a wonderful idea to have, but I don't think you could also have a basic income in that. However, my basic income, what it has said is that we would provide catastrophic health insurance across the board. So there'd be kind of like a catastrophic Medicare for all across the board. And then people would be responsible for the other parts of healthcare that don't cover catastrophic. When I talk about catastrophic, what we're trying to do is if somebody gets in a terrible car crash, they can't use their arms anymore, they lose their job, and then they lose their house because they have to declare medical bankruptcy. What I want to do is through my universal basic income, the federal land dividend, we would pay everyone to be covered under those circumstances. If they were to other different types of situations, medical situations, like you want to, pregnancy or things like that, that would be covered through one's own private health insurance.
All right, I got a last couple easy ones here. And you don't have to answer this one if you don't feel like it, but what are your spiritual practices or religion?
Oh, yeah, I know people don't like this about me, but, as people might know, I'm a pretty well-known atheist. I'm not really an atheist. I'm just more of an agnostic. But because Richard Dawkins was
you're in company here. I am too, so, okay. It's all good.
Well, in 2016 and also in 2018, Richard Dawkins was somewhat supportive on his Facebook page of sharing my articles. So I have been a long-standing secular person pushing for secular ideas because ultimately science and technology is somewhat of a secular movement. That said, I got to be honest, the last few years I've been making a little bit of more inroads with Judeo-Christian culture and opening my arms and not emphasizing secular ideas anymore. Just because it doesn't make sense in politics when America is so religious. But that said, I still remain ultimately a non-believer or just somebody who really doesn't know.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no big deal there. I think it's very brave of you for even, running and saying that because a lot of, every president who has always espoused some sort of religion, right? So, kudos for you for even doing that. Let's see, Tree Walker, do you support ranked choice voting? Why not?
Ranked choice voting, yeah, absolutely, and I have supported and written about ranked choice voting since 2015 as well. You can look at some of the articles for Vice as well as term limits. Yes, absolutely, and you become a supporter of ranked choice voting when you run third party, because all of a sudden you realize there is no chance to make a difference as a third party. But if you have ranked choice voting, all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of brand new people into the political system. They might not be the leaders in politics, but at least they can go from being an independent to somebody more recognizable. And that's what ranked choice voting essentially does, is it brings out people with new ideas and starts pushing them towards the top. So I am an absolutely huge supporter of that, and I wouldn't mind a constitutional amendment to support something like that, as well as term limits in Congress.
Right on, right on. So, last question, and this was, I had wrote down all these questions the previous night, and when I went back to take a screenshot, this comment had been deleted. I don't know why, because it's a very good question. But if maybe I overlooked, if I find it again, I'll put it on the screen for the viewers. But do you support getting money out of politics, dark money out of politics?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Look, so I think first off, Citizens United could be not necessarily overturned, but it's really something that every single state should decide. I don't like the Supreme Court decided on it. And I also think we need to limit lobbyists' power. I mean, one of the biggest platforms I have is tort reform, or reform essentially of the judicial system, because we have so many lawyers. Like when you talk about why healthcare is so expensive, and I'm married to a physician, generally it has to do because lawyers kind of gotten in there and they're making a lot of money off a lot of different cases that some cases aren't necessarily good, and they just make it more expensive for the entire health system to operate. Well, of course, the same thing is happening with Congress. Congress is filled with attorneys, and attorneys have a way of kind of making the minutia stick out and slowing down things, making more bureaucratic process. So I really think when you talk about kind of, election reform and money out of politics, you really got to make sure that we can stop the lobbyists. And of course, most of those lobbyists are attorneys. We need to stop that entire profession from making politics so difficult in the first place, except for very rich people to win and very maybe known people to win. We need to make it so that there's like this kind of openness. And of course, that has to do with maybe overturning Citizens United, as well as saying, I have policies that would, for example, give certain financial incentives to bring in minorities and to bring in women and to bring in people of different occupations. I want to have plumbers. I want to have nurses. I want to have high school teachers in Congress. I think that would be the best way to actually show a real democracy. But, getting rid of money is so essential, because if it's only billionaires that can, compete in the elections, then how does somebody like myself or even Andrew Yang compete? It doesn't work. We need a lot of the dark money out of politics.
Yeah, I think the real test will be coming up with Bloomberg and Sanders to see, if the billionaire or if the grassroots will actually, which they'll meet, two bulls head to head. I'm ready to see that. And really, in my opinion, that's the only reason why Amy Klobuchar has seen such a growth, is because she's wanting to get rid of Citizens United, and that's a big thing. I mean, Citizens United was one of the stepping stones that led, enabled people like Obama to pretty much, allow Wall Street to walk away with raping America, so. But, this is pretty much all we got. I appreciate you coming on. This has been Zoltan Istvan. He's running for president on the Republican ticket. He's a supporter of UBI, properly vetted now by the Yang Gang, and I wish you luck, man.
Hey, thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. I'll look forward to sharing this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll send it to you. Alright guys, so what'd you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. This is no way an endorsement of Zoltan, but I do think that, he has some good ideas to share, some things he needs to be pushed back on. I hope he, I wish him luck. I think he needs to run on the Democratic ticket. I do think his his approach to parties is pretty good, and it is what it is. So, I hope you guys like it, comment down below. I'll see you guys later.